Yo, we're back. Thanks for joining me last time. And last time we put the heal function and the hurt player function into play. Now, in this episode, we're going back to the classroom and we need to learn a little bit more. So what we're going to learn this time is we're going to learn how to specify the result of a function. And this is good reading. So this is a good lesson. So sometimes you want a result and sometimes you don't. Now, if you remember last time, we learned a function or a type of function, not a type of function, but a type that's called void. And that type, it does not return anything. So let's dive into that a little bit more and figure out what that means. So functions can perform actions. One thing a function can do is to give you back a value when you call it. This value is called the result. For example, when you call the function getRandomInteger and then you put the parameters 1 through 10 inside the parentheses, you expect to get a random integer between 1 and 10. That's because that's right there. So to change the type of value that you want from your function, you would have to change the type in the function signature. For example, get number of mousetraps you can afford. This type is an integer, so it's going to return an integer. This function will return an integer. So in this example, get number of mousetraps you can afford has the return type integer. So when you call get number of mousetraps you can afford in your code, you can expect that it will return an integer, just like we said. Now, if you change that same thing, get number of mousetraps you can afford, and you change the type to a float, then the return will return a float. Just as simple as that. So when your function has a return type specified, the function body or the code block has to produce a result that matches that type. If it does not, the code will not compile, which means you're going to have a compiler error, which if you've been following along, we've ran into 2 compiler errors so far when we try to compile our code. So let's learn how to avoid this and make sure that we are using these correctly. So first, let's learn some keywords or some terms. The result is the function. All right, so sorry. The result is the value that the function returns when it executes or runs, okay? So lesson 2, we covered keywords, which are special words that are built into the verse language and that have very specific actions attached to them. In verse, the word return is also a keyword. It tells us that it tells a function to provide the value that results from the expression that follows the return keyword. For example, right here, my function, we said they are calling the type an integer and they're asking it to return the number 5. So when they run this on begin, their function is going to run and the result is going to be 5. So in the code above, this code will return a value of 5 when my function is called, just like we just saw. So listen to this. This is a good note. Leaving return out, it will not break your function, but it's good practice to explicitly include return. And if you don't know, if you want to know more about this, we can do a lesson on functions, which I think we've already covered. Let's look at it real quick. Oh no, so we can go over this a little bit. Oh no, we actually did. We did this lesson. So you guys, we did this lesson. If you want to go more in on this lesson, we can do this part of this lesson. So maybe for next time if you want to do more on functions. But let's just keep on going on this lesson, okay? Early returns. Let's stop real quick. So what we just learned was about the word return. And this is a keyword inside of verse. And that keyword is going to return whatever you put after it, according to the function. It'll also break your code. Not break it. It'll stop the code as we're about to learn. So early returns. When your program executes a return expression, the program will exit out of the function code block immediately. And this is what I was just talking about. This means that if you place the return expression before other code, the code that follows will not execute. This can be useful for exiting a function early when a specified condition is met. So the following function updates the coins variable based on the coins per mousetrap. However, the coins variable must be set to a positive value to buy a mousetrap. If the coins is negative, the function prints an error message and immediately returns because there's no reason for it to run the rest of the code in the function body. In fact, without return, the function would incorrectly decrease the value of coins and never indicate that the coins was negative. So let's look at that and see if we can figure this out. So first of all, they set a variable called coins, and we know that it's a type integer, and the value of that type is -10. So our coins are already -10. Coins per mousetrap. It's an integer, and this is a constant we see. And this integer value starts at 100. Woo, can't read. Now, when we call this function by mousetrap right here, we gave it a type void, meaning that there's no return here. But we put the body of the function here. So this is the code block that will execute when this function is run. But let's look at the code block. It says if coins is less than 0, well, in this case our coins are, then we want it to print error. Coins is set to negative value. And then we want it to return. So it will never run this part of this code. Ever. Because we got the return here and it's just going to exit out of the code. So let's keep on going. Exiting a function early with return can introduce bugs, so it's important to use it carefully. For example, since return will run before print, mousetrap you bought have, coins left. In the following code, the function will never print the new value of coins. And why is that? Let's look at it. So everything looks, all right, so they got a variable, coins, integer. So they have 500 coins this time. They've got a constant, it's an integer, and that's 100. It says coins per mousetrap, so it costs 100 coins, and we have 500 coins. So when we call this function, it's a type void, and then it says a condition. If coins are less than 0, print error, coins set to negative value. Well, that's not the case, so it's going to keep on running. Then it says set coins to coins minus coins per mousetrap. So it will do that, and then it will return. And in this case, it's never going to print this line here because of our return code right here. So it doesn't do this part because this part is not true, but it does run the set coins right here. It will not print this because we put a return. So if you have an early return in your code will still compile, but Visual Studio Code will warn you that the expressions after return will not run. So let's learn about the type void now, because we've been using that, we've been talking about that for at least 2 videos now, but we never really dove in and understood it. So void for functions with no useful results. Sometimes you want a result and sometimes you don't. If you remember the types from lesson 2, then you might also remember that each type needs a particular kind of value. The list below is a very short list, but Verse uses a lot of different types. But these down here are the most common types and are the foundation for using variables and constants. So we've done this before, but because it's here, obviously they want us to remember this. So I'm going to go over it again. These are the 4 different types that we'll be using most commonly. It doesn't even have void on this list, but it has these 4 different types. So let's look at them. A logic, this is a type that can only be true or false, and the values will be true/false. Integer, an integer is an int is an integer, which is a whole number, not a fraction, and an integer is short, int is short for integer, and that's a whole number. Float, this type of value is for those that are not integers, such as fractions. These are going to be numbers with decimal places. Even if it's like 20 can be written as a float as 20.0. And then lastly, the string. This is a type for any kind of text. This could be letters, numbers, punctuation, spaces, and even emojis. You can put all of that inside of a string. So that's the values a string will return. Now, when you create a function that doesn't need to produce a result, you can set the function return type to void. And that's what they've been doing this whole time. So if you see this function right here, it's set to the type void because it doesn't need an immediate result. We just need it to run what's in the function. And the opposite of, or another example of that is this one right here. get random int 1 through 10, that actually has a return. So it's going to give you an integer. Let's keep on looking down. All right. So this means the last expression in the code block can produce a result of any type without generating a compiler error because the type for the function is set to void. So there's the advantage of using void, right? You can produce a result of any type without generating a compiler error. You can still use the return keyword for functions that have a void type. You just don't need to provide a value with the return keyword. For example, there's no value here. But in our first example, return 5, there was a value because this type is not void. If this type was void, we wouldn't have to put a number 5 right here. Okay, so let's look over the summary. This is what we need to remember from this chapter or from this lesson. The result is what you get back from a function when you call it. In a code block, the last expression will produce the result. To change the type of value in a function, you would change the type in the function signature. A return is a keyword, or just return is a keyword that tells the function to provide the value that results from the expression following it. An early return is when the keyword return is used in a code block before the end of the block. This will cause the program to exit that code block immediately without running the rest of the code in the block. Void is a type that says that the value of the function won't be used anywhere else. Or maybe it says that it's just not worth bothering. You know what I'm saying? You don't need a value. You can use void as the type for a function that doesn't need to produce a result. Bow. So that is the end of this lesson here. Lesson 7, specifying the result of a function. And I hope that you learned a lot because, I learned a lot, and you can just go back and watch over this video and we can keep on learning. So thanks for your time. I'll holla at y'all in the next one. Peace.